6:30 p.m. It is Orange and Blue Today, presented by Champ Honda, Cecil, Lammey, Andrew Mason on a day where you may think there's not much to talk about with the Denver Broncos. Well, Mace, you and I are some chatty blankety blankers, so we're ready. We're here to chat, brother.
Yeah, we're here to chat, and if there's nothing that is on a platter, we're going to come up with stuff. Now, that being said, Thursday is going to be interesting because it is the pre-draft Broncos press conference taking place at midday on Thursday,
Yes.
which will be the last thing we hear from them before the draft and the only thing, the first time we've heard from anybody connected with the Broncos on the record since the league meetings there at the end of March in Phoenix. But we'll we'll have plenty to dive into tomorrow. Today, it's a little more stuff that's tangentially related to the Broncos rather than directly involving the Broncos.
Right. And what's trending on Twitter today was Trey Lance. Wasn't the Mandalorian season finale, which will give you all the feels, Mace. I won't spoil it for you.
I'm behind.
You're behind?
I'm gonna have to binge it here, probably after the draft. I
Okay.
haven't been able to keep up, so yeah, no spoilers or anything like that.
No spoilers, and this season's kind of blah anyway. But for what they did, they stuck the landing enough. So you should be pleased. But today, what wasn't trending in that terms was trending with Trey Lance. The 49ers have received phone calls, all these sorts of things. I want to preface this by saying I don't think the Broncos do this. But Mace, you and I love to be critical thinkers, one, which I think is largely dying in our society, which is sad. But two, we also love to kind of look. Everyone's saying like this will never happen. You and I like to look at stuff and say, okay, that's probably true, but why not? So
Yeah.
my question to you, as you can see on our topics here, is like, why not Trey? Why not Trey Lance, especially when the conversation is around and the relationship with the 49ers is so close with the Broncos? Like, okay, if we're talking about a, day two pick, why not Trey Lance to then, work behind Russell Wilson? And I know they have Jared Stidham, so, that kind of crushes some things. But Trey Lance is the conversation today, so let's make it our conversation.
Yeah, I mean, why not is I don't know if the Broncos have enough draft capital to pull it off. I mean, Trey Lance is what we would say is a distressed asset, as in the value of the asset isn't close to what it was a couple of years ago when the Niners made that trade up to select Trey Lance. But I don't know if he's fallen far enough to where a third round pick, which is what you'd be talking about if you're trading a day two choice, because the Broncos don't have a second round pick this year or next year. I don't know if that would be enough. I mean, you may be talking about multiple day two picks. Maybe if you since you only have a second rounder in there, maybe three second rounders or three third rounders perhaps over the next 2 years to get it done. And I I don't think the Broncos will do that. But there's also what I think the Broncos would do and what I would do. I
Right.
would take a flyer on Trey Lance. I'm not sure I'd give up three third round picks. But if you told me a third rounder this year, a third rounder next year would get it done, I'd think long and hard about it because I still think there's some potential there with him. And really we don't yet know on Trey Lance just yet. We, they gave him the keys last year. He had one shaky start in a monsoon in Chicago in week one, and then he fractured his ankle. And that came off limited work as a rookie. I mean, we do not know on Trey Lance. And so that's why I'd still be intrigued, and I think it's worth having the conversation.
Well, I like Nate brings up your Jerry Judy in a third for Trey. Like, okay, yeah, these are all parts of the
Mm-hmm.
conversation I think that we should consider. And the thing with Trey Lance, just such bad luck.
Yeah.
I mean, you can't really say guys aren't injured. If you're injured, you're not a bust. So you can't really call Trey Lance a bust right now. Now, things haven't looked good when he has been handed the keys. He had the arm fatigue as a rookie, which I know some people denied, but you and I know enough to know that, like, yeah, no, that was a concern for those guys behind the scenes. But it's like, okay, Trey Lance is available if you're the Broncos. see what you could get or at least see what you can do with this kid. And if you're the 49ers, they're happy with Sam Darnold. They're happy with Brock Purdy, who may be a little bit more injured than people want to talk about. But, yeah, they'd be fine, and then you would have a shot. I like Trey Lance coming out of college. Full disclosure, I did. Now, raw and all these sorts of things and toolsy. Like, there's a million things we could say about the kid. The one thing I just want to say, Mace, is he's been a bit unlucky.
Yeah, things have worked against him. Even though you look at the coaching he's getting out there, you look at the environment, it should be favorable for development. Just things that have gone Brock Purdy's way, at least until the NFC Championship game, haven't broken in favor of Trey Lance. And look, there's a reason why they wanted him. Because they looked at Jimmy Garoppolo and thought his skill set, he's taken us basically as far as he can. We're not going to get over the hump. And the one thing about that offense, that scheme, and that coaching particularly is, and we saw it with Gary Kubiak when he was a coach as well, typically it has quarterbacks playing one level above their norm. So in other words, somebody like Jimmy Garoppolo, who among starting quarterbacks I think is a pretty mid-tier guy, somewhere between 13 and 20, right? Well,
yeah.
We saw that in that scheme, particularly in 2019, but again for flashes in 21 down the stretch, that Garoppolo could be a top 12 quarterback in that scheme with that coaching. And so I get what the thought was with Trey Lance. Like, look, he has all these amazing raw tools. He's also extremely intelligent. So if you get him in here and coach him up, and he has these elite traits with the high level intelligence, the sky would conceivably be the limit for him. It hasn't worked out. It has been luck involved. But I'll tell you this. I mean, if I'm the 49ers, I wouldn't be making this deal right now because it's a sell low moment. You don't want to sell low if you can avoid it. And I would not have the confidence in Sam Darnold to where I'd say, okay, if Brock Purdy isn't back, and I could have told anybody when I saw Purdy get hurt in the NFC Championship game and learned that it was the UCL, and the way they were kind of soft pedaling it and saying, oh, maybe it's going to get better with rest. You know what usually happens when you say, let's see if it gets better with rest with that ligament? That athlete, because it's usually in baseball, that athlete's usually having Tommy John surgery months down the line or even the following year when you say, okay, rest is going to be enough. So the fact that Brock Purdy's recovery appears to have stalled, it's no surprise to those who understand the nature of UCL injuries. In my opinion, he would have been better off getting the surgery immediately, which, might have put him on the shelf for all of 2023. But then it would have been some certainty. Instead, we're kind of now in this, we're now in this vague moment here where they've already gone down the path of seeing, okay, it's going to be a few months. They might as well go a few months more because there could be a slim chance he's available for this year. I honestly, Cecil, I haven't liked the way the 49ers have handled any of this, including the Sam Darnold option. I think they could have done better than Darnold.
The thing is about Darnold, and we had an interesting conversation because it's more 49ers today. I don't even know what we would call their colors, like gold and burgundy?
Scarlet and gold.
Scarlet and gold today, presented by Champ Honda.
But I believe it actually is scarlet, not red.
Okay, well, that's awesome. We love John Lynch. We love Kyle Shanahan. I know this, and I know that I believe it was Dove Kleeman that said my report was false, which is fine. Maybe it wasn't him, but it was somebody I don't know, and they're like, this report is false. And it was on Pat McAfee's show. McAfee said I was a nice guy. When I had reported years ago, he doesn't know me. I had reported that the 49ers almost traded their first-round pick to the Jets for Sam Darnold. And instead, the Jets wanted to see Zach Wilson's pro day, some shoulder concerns. They wanted the 49ers to wait. John Lynch didn't want to wait. And so they traded up to 3. That became Trey Lance. We know that Kyle Shanahan from Chris Sims, and, Kyle and Chris have their initials tattooed on each other's bodies. So Bo Scaife, the other one, and then there's the fourth Texas guy I can't ever remember. I can't ever remember who the fourth one was, but this is how dumb I am. I'll tell a quick story, Mace. I'm on the air with Bo Scaife, good friend, and I was like, what kind of man gets another man's initials tattooed on his body? And Bo like lifts up his leg, and there's Kyle's initials. I was like, oh, hey, I'm a jerk. Anyway, back to what Pat McAfee doesn't know about me. But like, so I'd reported that. I have it on very good authority. It's not too difficult to figure out where that information comes from. And like people said, no. And then they get Darnold this year. And it's like, okay, well, they finally got the guy that they wanted to get. And then the Trey Lance thing with the Mac Jones thing, because Chris Sims said that Mac Jones was the guy that Kyle Shanahan wanted. So it's like and I feel bad for Trey. Again, I like Trey Lance, but there always have seemed to be this disagreement with that brass as to which quarterback they should have chosen.
Well, I mean, you go back to leading into the draft, I believe it was Adam Schefter who was insistent it was going to be Mac Jones. Remember that?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And knowing what we know, it doesn't take much to figure out where Adam probably got that information from.
Right.
Someone who would have a lot of knowledge. And the indications I've got is that it was very much there was very much a tug of war internally with the 49ers when it came down to Mac Jones or Trey Lance. And ultimately they decided on the upside of Trey Lance. And again, like it's the dangerous word, but it really is true for Trey Lance. There's a lot of potential in him. But the thing is, everybody knew it was going to take time, that you're going to have to be patient with Trey Lance. He only has a handful of starts.
19 starts.
Yeah,
that's it.
And how many of them as a pro? Because most of those starts came all the way back in 2019. You remember they played that one showcase game at South Dakota State.
Yep.
Or North Dakota State, pardon me, in 2020 because the FCS season got postponed.
Yeah, first time he threw a pick was in that game.
Yeah, and so they had this one-off game in an empty Fargo Dome that they streamed. It was just so bizarre because they literally played a one-off game for one player. One player. It did because they knew he was going into the draft process and thus wasn't going to be available in the 2021 season because he was going to be going through the pro day, the pro day process and all that. Everything that it was that in that COVID year because there was no combine. So it's everything on Trey Lance. It's not analogous to anything we've seen because he kind of came of age as a prospect in the most unusual time than any of us have seen, in football in the world, right?
Right.
So,
yes.
and so that's why you look at this situation, and I think it's fair to still be intrigued by Lance. And if you're a team that wants to upgrade take another shot, have another dart at quarterback that you're trying to develop, I say why not? I mean, and I think it did come up earlier in this chat, like Jerry Jeudy in the third, if it could get done, and you mentioned it. I'd be okay with that. And yeah, okay, I get it. You don't want to trade Jerry Jeudy, but you're in this make or break moment with Russell Wilson. And if you get Trey Lance going on the right path and Russell Wilson does well, then you have a good problem to have, right? And you can do that by getting Trey Lance out there in the preseason and having him show his stuff. And if he shows on the way back, then there's going to be some interest in him, even if you ride with Russell Wilson in the future. You can't. It's the old Ron Wolf philosophy: oversaturate the quarterback position, keep bringing in new young guys, and seeing where they go, because you can always, if you're developing your quarterbacks well, you can deal the surplus.
And Mace, we got to go through those Packers quarterbacks since you brought up Ron Wolf. Like it was Aaron Brooks, Mark Brunell, Matt Hasselbeck, Ty Detmer. Did I get them all?
Well, briefly, they had a guy named Kurt Warner in there.
Ah, yes, that's right. Yep.
Even Doug Peterson went on to start
Yeah, that's
for a
right.
short time in Philadelphia.
Right.
Yeah, I think we got
I think
everybody
that's it. Like Jay
because
Fiedler wasn't there, nothing like that, right?
yeah, because after Brooks and Hasselbeck, the tap kind of went dry, but that was right about the time that Ron Wolf stepped away from day to day. I think it was
Right.
funny. I was reading something from about Ron Wolf recently about how because he retired at like age 62 and then kind of went into an advisory role, and it was a surprise when he walked away. But he basically said he didn't want to. He didn't want to overstay his welcome, right? He didn't want to be that guy that was hanging out forever and the game changing and you weren't changing along with it. So, he probably walked away with gas left in the tank. But the problem for the Packers is they never replicated that ability to find quarterbacks, even as they had their entrenched starter after Wolf left, because they took swings like, for example, Brian Brom. Remember him?
Yes, there were some Peyton Manning comparisons when Brian Brom cut out of Louisville, which I always thought was crazy.
Yeah, like there are certain quarterbacks you just shouldn't do the comparison with, right?
No, no.
No Peyton Manning comparison, no John Elway comparison, no Tom Brady comparison. Like the trap, the mental trap that people get caught in on Tom Brady is thinking, well, he was a 6th-round pick. Any 6th-round pick can become the guy. I've posted the numbers a few times over the last few years. The chances are so infinitesimally low that it's a lottery ticket, right? There's a reason why I say quarterbacks, once you really get out of the top 15, are basically lottery tickets to some degree. It's like late in the first round, it's like a pick 3 and you can win, whereas you get to like the 6th round, it's like Powerball odds.
Right. Your odds get a little bit lower the further you go down, but you take that swing because here's the thing, and we had some talk about Jarrett Stidham in the chat room. Yes. Jarrett Stidham, we've talked about it. Upside, Sean Payton really likes him. I still think they're going to add another quarterback. Mm-hmm. Like, I think it's crazy to think that they wouldn't add another quarterback to the room. Aiden O'Connell slips, whatever. Max Dugan, right? Undrafted, whatever. Like, yeah, there's going to be another quarterback here. So, I think we should look forward to that Ron Wolf strategy of just burning through them, baby.
Yeah, I'm just kind of hoping it's not Clifford, who we know that the Broncos have talked to, but I'm pretty cool on him coming out of Penn State.
Yes.
I don't see it.
Yeah, tight end maybe, but okay.
Yeah.
Just don't waste a draft pick on him, which leads me to our next topic, Orange and Blue Today, presented by Sean Ponda. And Mace, you love alliteration. I love using other words when you can't cuss. I am from the country, so to quote Christmas Story, I work in profanity like an artist works in oil and clay. I think I got the quote right. But anyway.
I think you did. That's really
close,
good.
Pretty close.
It's your true medium, a master.
It is. So, yes, it's a second language for me. But, okay, we can't say it, but I like to say jock blocking. And when I bring up this topic to you as we're going over show notes, and you're like, I wanted to talk about that. And it's great because we get to talk about kind of preventing your opponent from getting talent. Zay Flowers is working out for the Chiefs. Zay Flowers on the Broncos' radar. Zay Flowers, potentially could be there. Maybe even the type of guy you want to move up for. But I lose my mind when I think of Zay Flowers on the Chiefs. I'm like, you're just giving these guys weapons. It's very reminiscent, and I will bring up the name just because it's appropriate. I know people got sick of me talking about Isaiah Pacheco every time, Mace. But when the Chiefs get Pacheco, and I'm like, you just gave those guys a weapon because you didn't get him, because you wanted Faion Hicks or whatever. Okay, Zay Flowers working out for the Chiefs. I'm getting anxiety, nervousness, just from thinking about a talent like Flowers on a team that has proven no Tyreek Hill, no Juju Smith-Schuster, no Chris Conley, whoever. We'll just keep rotating through those wide receivers.
Not only working out with the Chiefs, but Patrick Mahomes was throwing in passes.
Ugh.
According to Adam Schefter's report. So that's pretty much we're serious here. If you're going to give him some reps with Mahomes. Look, if somehow the Broncos were able to get a first-round pick for Jerry Jeudy, if they did make that deal, I think the chances are pretty good they would turn around and use that pick on a wide receiver like Jalen Hyder out of Tennessee or like Zay Flowers, right? Either one would make sense. You and I saw Flowers at the Shrine, and the Shrine getting Zay Flowers tells you a bit about where the Shrine Bowl was trying to go as a game.
Yes.
Ordinarily, past years would have gone to the Senior Bowl lock, stock, and barrel, but he went to the Shrine, and he was as advertised. I mean, he got off to a little bit of a slow start, but then by day 2, just was absolutely rolling. I mean, I think on day 1, A.T. Perry probably impressed you and I a little bit more than Zay Flowers. By day 2, it was Zay's show. Not that A.T. Perry dropped off. It was just Zay being the complete package. And yeah, the notion of him in Kansas City, it's scary. Now, it's not that the Chiefs don't make some mistakes. I mean, I look back to the 2020 draft, and I think, okay, as said at the time, the player that the Chiefs could take late in the first round that would truly scare me from a Broncos perspective is Jonathan Taylor.
Yes.
Fortunately for the AFC West, even though the Chiefs have gone on winning division titles, but fortunately they took Clyde Edwards-Helaire, who certainly is dynamic, but...
And that was based on a Pat Mahomes recommendation, which leads me back to my Montreal, Washington conversation. It's like, listen, the quarterbacks, I love you all. You're not scouts.
But you're not scouts! You're not. You haven't been studying. With all respect, the quarterbacks haven't been studying these guys the whole time, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I'm intrigued that Patrick Mahomes is throwing to Zay Flowers today, but that can't be the basis of your decision. That being said, the basis of your decision, based on the film, based on the attributes, all that, should tell you Zay Flowers is a pretty wise pick. But yeah, you let the quarterbacks make the calls. That's where you're going to get into a little bit of trouble. Montreal, Washington. Oh,
yeah, that's
man.
how you end up there. So, are you a fan of jock blocking?
Yeah. What?
Are you a fan of jock blocking? Of like understanding if someone's on the other one's radar? And Zay Flowers is different than Isaiah Pacheco, obviously a first rounder compared to a 7th rounder. Or a first rounder-ish prospect compared to a late round prospect. But like I am constantly aware of what the opponents within your division are doing.
Yes. I mean, it almost came up last year because according to a lot of the rumblings and word around the campfire, the Chiefs were very interested in Trey McBride out of Colorado State. And I know the Broncos were very interested in Trey McBride as well. They, of course, took Greg Dulcich in the 3rd, which tells you how much tight end was on their radar. But Arizona stepped in and made that pick. I would not have been surprised if McBride had fallen a couple more slots if the Broncos wouldn't have traded up, not only to get McBride, but also to prevent him from being tight end 2 in Kansas City, partnering with Travis Kelce. And, of course, we hear a lot of things about the Chiefs and tight ends this year as well. I mean, the way it's going is it appears now that the Chiefs feel pretty good about their offensive line, even after losing Orlando Brown, that this is a let's get Pat a couple more weapons here draft.
Mm-hmm.
That's why you hear of their interest in Dalton Kincaid, and we see today this meeting and throwing session with Zay Flowers. And yeah, I do, like, if you're in position, I do believe very strongly that sometimes you make a pick to say, let's get away from, let's keep that player from going to a team.
Yeah. Mace, I also have to bring up, I think maybe the ultimate kind of miss or whatever, like could have had him or wanted him or whatever. It's Justin Herbert.
Well,
that one stings more than anything because he's right there and you got to watch him be excellent, for a decade.
The mistake there was going all in with Drew Lock. And even though you'd been scouting Herbert for years, and we know that the Broncos were very interested in Herbert if he'd come out after 2018. Frankly, if he'd come out after 2018, I think the Broncos would have moved up a bit in the draft and they would have taken Justin Herbert in the 2019 draft, but he didn't. And then you got duped by 5 games of Drew Lock. That's what happened. To me, unless you know 100% that you got the guy at quarterback, you shouldn't junk what you've been doing. You should always be looking. Just because you had Drew Lock doesn't mean you shouldn't have been thinking about taking Justin Herbert in retrospect. And that was the mistake the Broncos made. Now, they would have had to move up for Justin Herbert, yes, but I would argue, based on what I've learned over time, and I'm sure what you've learned as well, I would argue that the Broncos had the C word on Justin Herbert, the magic C word, conviction. And if you have a conviction on a quarterback, you do what it takes to get that quarterback.
You get your guy. And that's why we love D-Mac. But when D's like, tank and get the number 1 pick, I'm like, if you see your guy, whoever that is, you move heaven and earth to get him.
Okay.
You get your guy.
All right. Let's fast forward to next year, okay? Let's say that Russell Wilson isn't the guy and Jarrett Stidham doesn't prove much, all right? And the Broncos develop a conviction on Caleb Williams, Drake May, or both. But the Broncos finish 7-10. You think they're not going to move heaven and earth to get up and find a way to get one of those top 2 picks and get one of those quarterbacks? Of course they're going to do that. And the other thing is, like, Sean Payton has shown he will sacrifice mega draft capital. 3 first-round, next 3 years of first-round picks, done. They do it. And that's why even if the Broncos go 7-10 and Russell Wilson shows he's not the guy, the door is not closed to them getting Caleb Williams or Drake May a year from now. It is not. In fact, it's very much in play because they would make, Sean Payton specifically, would be willing to make the audacious move to get that kind of quarterback.
And this is a callback.
Yeah.
Sorry, Mason, I'm a movie writer. It's on the side.
No, it's good. No.
It's a callback to our first topic. The reason why they don't do Trey Lance is because they probably already have a mindset about Caleb Williams.
We know Sean Payton loves Caleb Williams.
Yeah.
That's on the record. I mean, we don't know what he feels about Drake May, but it would be safe to say that they probably like what they see because an awful lot of people like what they see in Drake May. I mean,
you give me chills just talking about that, dude.
Look, with all respect to Bryce Young, C.J. Stroud, Anthony Richardson, Will Levis, those 2 quarterbacks next year are better than any of the quarterbacks in this year's draft. Boom. Easily. If Drake May were in this year's draft process, he'd go number 1 overall, and there'd be no question. If Caleb Williams were in this draft process this year, number 1, no question, right? That's just and teams know that. It's a reason why if you've got the little bit of doubt on the Houston Texans right now, right? Because everybody's looking at what the quarterback class is going to look like next year with those 2 guys at the top of the draft, those 2 studs. I mean, you know, if you're, with all respect to the quarterbacks this year, the potential generational guys are next year.
Yes. And I love C.J. Stroud, but you don't like move up for a guy that's safe. You know, why do you like C.J. Stroud? He's safe. Like, oh, okay, those generational talents are next year. It is Orange and Blue today, presented by Sean Ponda, Cecil, Lammey, Andrew Mason. Couple minutes left, Mace. I got to this a little bit too late. My apologies. But we got writing up edges. Yeah,
we got going on quarterbacks.
Well, like I said, we're chatty blankety blankers, but like the edge of tomorrow, you've written up edges for denversports.com. My report is sitting in front of me right now, almost done. And you're writing up Broncos fits and some sleepers. I'm writing up the class as a whole. Both of us are writing about Andre Carter.
Yeah.
I wonder why.
Great minds and fools, right? I mean,
right.
That's, on Andre Carter, when you see a guy like him, you go to the Senior Bowl and like you want to see if it translates, and it absolutely translated with him. But it's the potential, the length this guy has. He's 6'6", long arms. He knows he has that wingspan. He knows how to use it. He knows how to use his hands, use those arms against the tackles he's going to be going against. I mean, I would rather take Andre Carter on day 3 than any edge that you could be talking about on day 2. That's how strong conviction I have on Andre Carter. He is incredibly raw. You're probably not going to get much out of him as a rookie, but watch where he is in a couple of years. And on top of everything else, he's very smart and he's very disciplined, as you would expect coming from West Point. And that's and to me, those are a couple other checks when you're checking off the boxes on an Andre Carter, is those intangibles beyond the length and beyond the pass rush moves.
And what's really weird about Carter, weird in a good way, look at his coverage ability.
Yes.
How many edge guys do we say, like, you could put him in coverage and he's not lost? And part of it is that length, but he's a bursty player. He's very dedicated, and his coverage, like, it's fun. I'm writing up edges, and most of my report is on his edge ability, but I had to throw in a sentence about, like, he's really good in coverage, too.
Do you remember when Vic Fangio first got here and he was trying to drop Bradley Chubb into coverage?
Yes.
And we're like, what's going on? You can't do that with Chubb. He's 270 pounds. He doesn't have that skill set. Well, Andre Carter actually does have that skill set. The other thing with Vance Joseph coming in is this. We've seen how he figured out how to use Isaiah Simmons effectively eventually over time.
Took some time, right.
It took some time. I don't think it would take him that long with Carter to figure out the different ways in which he could use him because of the Simmons experience.
Orange and Blue Today, presented by Sean Honda. He's Andrew Mason. You follow him on Twitter at Mace Denver. I am at Cecil Lammey. Until next time, be safe, be kind, know that you are appreciated. Stay tuned, and, well, there's one thing we ask you to do on this show. It's always stay frosty.